Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to the Path to Universal Search. My name is Nery Encarnacion. My coworker is Sean Rasmussen. We work for Allstate. The clicker?
Oh, this way.
Sorry.
Okay. Or not.
We work for Allstate. Allstate is the #1 publicly held insurer in the United States and number 81 on the Fortune 500 company. That's the shameless plug, Let's get to know, me and Sean. I've been working for Allstate for the past 11 years, straight out of college. Didn't know what I was going to do, so started doing search. I started doing enterprise search, and back then it was very TK2. Then, I started as a support analyst. Then I actually started doing IDLE. Then from IDLE, actually, we started exploring Google Search Appliance, and now we're actually looking into Solar, actually utilizing Solar. When I'm not actually working, which is actually a couple of hours a day, I'm either in a remote location somewhere taking pictures. I'm a photographer aficionado, or actually cycling. I love cycling. It has changed my life, so those are the two things, my favorite pastimes that I actually do. Sean?
And I'm Sean. I've been with Allstate for about 5 years now. Started in the search field 5 years ago, first with IDLE, and then moved into the solar world for about the last 2 years. And when I'm not working, I'm spending time with my family. I have 4 wonderful children and a beautiful wife, and I'm a reservist in the Air Force, so I travel with the military a lot.
Okay, we're gonna give you an idea of what we're gonna be talking today. We're gonna be talking about how we got here. It's been kind of a journey for us, so we would really wanted to share the experience with everybody. We're gonna talk about a little bit of a how, where do we go when we started. We're gonna talk about use cases, all the requirements we actually look, and how we started our selection process, how we ended up with Fusion. And now, once we have the product, how we actually did our search engine's results page. And we're going to finalize with only 2 guys, actually 3 guys, managing the infrastructure. How do we actually manage it all, right? So we're going to be talking about that a little bit. And we're going to have a couple of maybe 10 minutes for questions and answers. Okay? Let's get started. A couple of years ago, we were actually at a fork in the road. We had to upgrade our old version of our old product to the newer version because it was actually end of support. So at that point, we pretty much, to us, it was logical. What do we do here? Should we actually upgrade to the new one? Are we very happy with it? Or should we go out there and check what's new in the market, right? Well, you know why we're here, right? So we actually decided to look out there. We didn't know how to get started. It was, last time we did this, it was actually 7 years ago. So we didn't know who the new people in the market were, what products are actually hot right now, what are they actually gonna do for us, and things like that. So Sean and I looked at ourselves and we were like, okay, so we wanna change, so what do we do? How do we start this whole journey, right? We got some help. We started saying, well, you might want to review your business case. And we did. We found out that we were actually put in place to pretty much support the employee intranet. I think a lot of you probably have an employee intranet and they have search in there. That was actually our original mandate. Now, when we started doing that review process, we pretty much learned this is not only for employees, we're actually been using it for business as well. We've actually made that change without realizing it. So that was actually one of the biggest things we learned on this journey. Right now, I'm going to switch into some of the use cases we looked at, right? So more deep into how we actually work with the employee business case or use case and the business use case. For the employees, pretty much we wanted to do a lot of a data retrieval and from the different sources such as HR, SAP. We wanted to go into SharePoint. We wanted to go into ServiceNow, GitHub, and Jira. Even Slack, actually, that's the next new thing that we've seen. We wanted to go to all of those sources, and we wanted to provide a very seamless experience. We wanted to be able, to show results to all of the users, but only the results that were actually allowed to see, right? Being a big corporate environment, you don't want everybody to see all the information in there. So that was one of the biggest requirements. Also, you wouldn't even have to actually sign in to the system to see that information. That was actually our use case, right? So maybe this actually applies to you, maybe not, but that's what we thought we were actually doing. I'm going to share a little story with you to actually show you what was really happening. Excuse me. We all have probably a help desk at work, right? So let's say you actually have to call in for a problem. You have some issue in your computer. You need help. You need a software installed so you can actually look at a presentation or maybe a visual diagram. Well, unfortunately, the analyst can help you right there at the moment. So he opens a case. He gives you an actual case number, and you go on, with your day. You are in this meeting, and you figure, well, I really need to look at this diagram. So let me see how that case is actually going. You have a case number, so you figure at this point, you know what? I can actually just probably go to my intranet and search for it, right? It should be connected to ServiceNow, and I should just be able to get that result. Well, let's go to that part of the journey, right? So as you see there's a search box on the intranet. You actually you type your incident number in there, 0 results. That's, you figure that's not a bad thing, so maybe it's not connected or it's not expected for you to actually see it. Then you realize at some point, maybe if I go to the actual ServiceNow system, I can actually probably see the result of that. Well, let me go in there. I go. When I go in there, I go into ServiceNow, I see a search box. Now the catch for us has been always, which search box? I don't know if you're familiar with ServiceNow, but there are way too many search boxes in there. We love it. It's very context aware, right? So, I'm happy. I'm going to type that incident number, look for it, get 0 results again. At this point, even this has happened to myself as well. I'm like, oh, okay, so why am I not getting results, even though I'm actually in the ServiceNow system? That's kind of the frustration we were actually having. And if you remember earlier, I was telling you we wanted to go to all these places, but somehow they were actually not all connected with the current tool that we have. So that's one of when we said definitely we have the business case to go out there and review, evaluate any other products because it's not doing what we want it to. Now, that's the actual employee case. Maybe that's actually, again, works, that's what you're here for. If not, this is actually maybe that's what relates to you. I'm going to switch now into the business use case. Similar to the intranet, we wanted to talk about, we wanted to actually retrieve data from the different internal systems that actually, they have reference materials. Think about an agency, right? So at an agency, you have agency staff. And not all of them are actually trained at the same time. You have new employees and things like that. So they have a website they can go and look at those reference materials. Alongside, they also want to know how much they're going to get paid, how they're actually doing. They have a news and bulletins for the different regions and states. Ultimately, we also wanted to go into transactions, right? We're an agency, predominantly business. You go in there, let's say you didn't want to actually pay your insurance online. Your agency is right there. I'm just going to go talk to my agent and do the transactions in there. So usually a paper is generated. And sometimes, most of the offices lately, they actually do 0 paper policy. So they scan that document. They want to actually save it somewhere in our document management system. And obviously, they want that searchable, right? So that's the kind of the use case we were actually looking at with the business. Now, the experience for the business is slightly different. They had 2 similar requirements in such a way that they wanted to do a single sign-on, right? There are various systems, as I mentioned, and also you can be seeing somebody else's agency documents, right? So they have to be pretty much locked down to that specific agency and possibly that specific user. The last one is actually near real time. There's a lot of transactions going on, and sometimes your client actually calls you back within the last 10 minutes. So you want that document to really be searchable right away, right? Because you don't want who remembers everybody, right? So it's like, I'm just going to go in there. I just sent that document, right? So that was one of the biggest things they wanted. That was, well, actually one of the biggest difference we had from the employee case to the actual business case. We were really never worried about near real-time processing or indexing of data. Now it's story time again, but this is actually for the business. This is actually quite familiar with a lot of agents, and this is why we're actually starting to go into the actual business use case. As I mentioned earlier, your client actually calls in. We always want to actually make sure that we're actually paying, I guess not the least, but having all the discounts applied, right? So me as a client, I call my agent. He knows who I am. He tells me, hey, what do you want? What do you want to do? Well, I want to check if I have all the discounts applied. As an agent, he's got a lot of work to do behind that phone call, right? So he is actually wrangling to a bunch of different systems to actually look who I am, what kind of a policy do I have, what kind of if I have an auto, if I have a boat, if I have a car insurance, right? So he's got to look all that up, and then he's got to go somewhere else in some other system to actually pretty much figure out what's applicable for this region, for this state. As you can tell, it's not really easy to be in behind that phone call, right? So we were actually struggling with providing a very seamless experience to that agent. At this point, you actually pretty much have realized that we have so many things that we wanted to do, but we were actually not doing, right? So those were the two stories in parallel, right? The employee is not able to actually find a simple incident that they just had opened, or the agent having to use way too many systems to actually pretty much answer a simple phone call, right? So we started thinking, or actually gathering a list of all the places we wanted to go. What do we want it to do, right? What do we want to do? We know whether we wanted to actually go into all these different databases. We wanted to go into Oracle, MongoDB. We wanted to go after pretty much any single website that is out there. And also, sometimes they actually have a bunch of remote files that we want, that they actually, remote file servers that people just store data in there. The regions, they want to fly under the radar. So they actually store the data there and expect that to be actually part of the search experience, right? So at this point, we were realizing, okay, this is what we have. We have very limited connections into these different systems, and we really need to do something different. We want to do something different. We expect this tool to do something different. That's when we actually came up with the concept of universal search, and I could be a buzzword, or maybe it was a buzzword a couple of years ago, but that's what we kind of were thinking that we needed, right? So you go into your internet employee portal, you type a search entry, and this system goes out there and actually knows or is aware of all of this, all of these data repositories, and gets you an answer right there, right? That's what we really wanted to do. We were not really there, so we needed to pretty much go out into the market with those requirements. Now we figure this is going to be very challenging for to go to all these different vendors and explain this all the time, right? So we started wondering ourselves, is there such a thing out there? Are we really we've been really away from the market 7 years. Is this something that a tool does that for us? Well, we started with that question, and we figured, let's make this simple, right? What are going to be our most must-have requirements? We figure, since we have the business over here, we really need to put near real-time processing right at the top of the list, right? We want to actually serve the business the best, because you as an agent behind that phone call, you want to give that answer to your customer right away and keep them moving. As you can tell, we have a bunch of places we wanted to go. The next requirement we put it there was connectors. We really want to actually go to ServiceNow seamlessly. We want to go to Slack. We want to go to to all of those things we talked earlier. And the last one, it was kind of, we were being a little bit selfish. That was actually for us, really. The current system we have, or product we had, it's pretty much configuration file driven. It was really painful to keep track of all of those configuration files. So we said, we need an admin interface that actually can help us go through all of these configurations in an easy way. So that's how we pretty much come up with our must-have requirements list. And now Sean is actually going to be talking about the actual process we went through to select the product.
Thank you, Nery. So after all of that, at a big company like Allstate, we had to define our process, right? And so since we've been out of the market for so long, we had to figure out what products are out there in the search space, right? So we went to the Gartner Magic Quadrant, right? And Gartner ranks products based on vision, based on stability, and they've got this great chart that kind of plots where products live in those spaces, right? So we had to take a look at which products fit our business cases, right? Our use cases, right? Do those products still exist? Because I'm sure you've heard with mergers and acquisitions, right? So some products that were on that list from last year aren't available anymore. And from that Magic Quadrant, we created what we called a short list, and we were looking for roughly four search applications, right? Four search spaces, and on those we're going to perform a proof of concept. And what we really wanted to do with that proof of concept was do it on-prem, do it in-house, put it through its paces, let it run its course, right? And so we contacted the major vendors that we put on our short list, and then we ran through. Some of them were demos, some of them were on-prem, but did the product do what it said it did? Does it fit our needs? And lastly, was it cost-effective? And then from that point, during that proof of concept, we're doing scorecards, right? Here's our requirements, and the requirement must-have list isn't the only set of requirements that we had, right? And in a big scope like what we were doing, those were the key things, but we really had a big scorecard, right? And then from that point, we reviewed the scorecards and we picked a winner. Guessing that you know this already, we're standing here, so we chose Fusion. It's the Lucidworks product. And this is a terrible, shameless plug for the Fusion folks, Lucidworks. This product, it came out where we needed it, right? We knew we wanted to use solar. We kind of had that preconceived notion going in that we wanted solar, right? The drawback from solar, maybe not the drawback from solar, but for us, for our cases, solar is a push only, right? You push the data into solar. There's not a lot. There's a couple of little, the DIH and stuff like that go get data, but for the most part, solar's push data in, right? And that doesn't fit our case. We needed to go fetch the data. And so the Fusion product really does that, right? It gave us the flexibility of connectors. A side bonus for us was the index and query pipelines. Another bonus for us was analytics, because who doesn't love charts and graphs? We also gained access controls, right? And so, and this helps us in the reporting side. This helps us in the admin UI. And we run a big Active Directory shop. So this worked out great, being able to plug right in because we don't have to manage any of that stuff. So with the connectors, I won't go over this entire list, but you can see here that the connectors out of the box, the connectors with very little configuration through the UI, all of these connectors take minutes to set up, and you're crawling your data sources, right? So for all of our business cases and what we were trying to accomplish, we did this very easily, and it took just a few minutes. We already had data flowing in, and we could start with the big bonus here, right? So the Fusion product gives you these index pipelines, and I don't know if you guys attended any of the other Fusion talks, but these allow you to modify the data on the way in. And so for us, that's a good deal because, as Nery showed, some of our use cases, we needed to be able to tag the content, right, with what it was. Should this be this region? Should it be that region, right? And so what I have on screen here is a fairly simple index pipeline by where we're going to take a file system stream, and it's going to contain an XML document. And we're going to reconstitute it, and we're going to map it to specific solar fields that we want. And then at that point, we're going to send it through Tika, and Tika is going to do a base 64 conversion because the documents that we're indexing in this particular case, as Nery alluded to, these agent documents, they're coming to us in base 64. And this is so we can transfer them over the wire through all the data centers and all that stuff, right? So from the Tika stage, we're going to go ahead and we're going to clean up the data a little bit. It says in the stage there, it says remove line breaks. What we're doing there is we're just kind of normalizing the data. We don't need all those line breaks and other type utilities indexed, right? We're going to do some more field mapping and copying of fields. And basically towards the end there, what you're going to see is that we send it through Solar, right? And that's and when you get the green light from Solar, according to your cluster and all of your stuff, right? If it's successful, that very last stage there, it actually goes back to the file system and deletes the file. That's a specific requirement for us because these agents sometimes processing, a couple 100,000 documents a day, so we don't want that storage on our servers, right? So now that that data is in there, we're going to allow our clients to start querying, right? And as Nery said, we still have our business clients, right? And so their applications hit our services, right? We basically run the search as a service at Allstate, right? So we're going to allow, what we're going to do is we're going to, the query pipelines allow us to do specific things, right? So here we can set the search fields. If you're using the EDISMAX parser and you want to search over multiple fields, or you want to do some custom querying that we've seen throughout the conference, you can do that in the search field stage. You can set those kind of parameters. We're also going to set a timeout enforcement, right? We don't want our client sending us a request that's going to take 3 minutes to process. We don't want to tie that up. Also, nobody ever needs 1,000 rows, right? It just does. It's unnecessary, and it hurts the caches, right? So we're gonna do some row enforcements. If you send us a 1,000 row query, we're gonna knock it down to a given range, and we'll work that out with the clients. Finally, set query parameters. We want this query to come in as lean as it can, right? And so without setting up custom handlers, query handlers inside Solar, what we decided to do was set these default parameters, right? So we'll talk with the client ahead of time, and we'll say, do you need spell check? Right? Do you need facets? Do you need some of these other things? And you can set all those through the query parameters. And then finally, it's going to query Solar, right? And you'll get your response back. A benefit of this is by using that API and those pipelines is every request that comes in through the API from Fusion gets logged. And here is a out-of-the-box implementation of the dashboard that you have for analytics, right? And you'll see here you have a time window, so you can pick anywhere between 5 minutes, 5 years. Also, there's some other little things that's probably hard to read. You've got relative, absolute, and cent. So you can literally drill down to the day, the minute, whatever you want to do for these queries. In the middle there on the top, we call it the search inside the search, right? So if your users are calling you and you're having a problem, they're having a problem with a specific query, it's coming back and they're saying it should have 50 results, and you don't know the context, right? So you could search for that particular, you could ask them what they, what terms they search for. You put them in there, and it'll actually find those, right? And then given the troubleshooting steps, you would narrow it down using the time picker, and you'll see exactly what query came in from them, so you can help them troubleshoot it, right? And then on the right, the top right, you have the total number of hits in that period. So this is great for us. We like to bill our clients. We're search as a service. We like to bill our clients, so we like to deliver them a report, right? So we know exactly how many queries they ran. Plus, if you look on the left, on the bottom, you see these usage graphs, right? So you can see your hotspots for each particular client. Now, for us, that ranges, right? Most of our business happens during the day, like I'm sure a lot of you do. But for catastrophes and things like that, our graphs spike way out of control, right? And so this helps us navigate and see usage so that we can pretend like we know what we're doing when we need to scale up, right? And finally, you have top 10 searches and top 10 searches with 0 results. So this helps you tune for your user base, right? So if you see a lot of queries coming in here with 0 results, you can email off, or we actually give our business users access to this graph, right? So they can see themselves, and they can adjust their content as they need to. So if they see a lot of search results for a particular keyword, they can go into the content system and they can tag that content, and then it stops being a zero search result, right? I'll just hit on this quickly. The security part that Fusion gave us is not just for the index documents, right? That's important, but for reporting, you don't want your users to be able to go in there and modify all of those charts and graphs, right? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But for us, it's important. We just want you to look at this particular graph, right? The admin UI, if they're going to be doing modifications, we made a choice to allow some of our customers to modify using like elevation, the elevate component in Solar. We also use the synonym component, right? So we allowed our customers to do some of that, right? But we want them locked down just to that. We don't want them to be able to go in there, and it happened just before we figured out how to do this. And we don't want them to hit the clear data source collection, the clear data source, right? Because then they lose all their documents. So we found that one out the hard way. So, and again, back to that point, we don't have to maintain this because we already have Active Directory in-house. Putting it all together, right, and this is where it all comes back, right? You have one seamless interface. It does all of the things listed here. You've got autocomplete, you can sort, you've got facets. One thing that I skipped that I realized, the query pipelines allow you to do boosting on signals, right? And so if you're using some sort of click tracking or anything like that, you have the ability to boost the documents so that more relevant search results at the top. And as I talked about, synonyming, right? So no matter where your user puts the search query, in the Omni box, right? In the search bar, in the address bar, anywhere they put their search, they'll get the results, right? So, how do 3 resources, they made me change that, I said 3 dudes, but legal didn't like that too much. So how do 3 people manage 9 search as a service clients, 32 servers, 1 million searches, and 50 million documents indexed with an expected growth rate at 2.5 million documents, right? Our Solar clusters are all physical machines, right? And our Zookeepers are virtuals, and our Fusions are physicals, right? So we've got a little extra overhead that we have to deal with to the tune of roughly 32 servers, right? And a side note, that's down from about 74 from our previous vendor, and that includes all our environments, right? So dev, test, QA, all of them included in that 32 servers. So we used Puppet, right? And we came up with a few in-house modules. We have one that builds and deploys our Zookeeper ensemble, our Solar instances, and our Fusion instances, right? So we run a very distributed cluster plus DR. So what Puppet enabled us to do is build these modules so it keeps our cluster in a consistent state, right? So Puppet runs at our shop, it runs every hour. So this addresses configuration drift, and it keeps our environment in a known state, right? So if we ever have a service outage, we know that within an hour, Puppet is generally going to come back and turn those services back on. Or if there were some sort of catastrophic failure, right, we'd start to see the errors in the, we use Foreman for management, right? And so I think we went a little quicker than we wanted, but we'll open it up for questions. Whew, no questions. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah. So it kind of depends, right? So you can use security trimming from, there's a security trimming stage, and we glanced over some of that to keep it kind of high level. But there's security trimming stages that allow you to just strip out, right, just based on your AD group usage. So if you're not a member of the HR security group in Windows, right, you don't see those values, right? And so when I was talking about adding those fixed fields on the way in, you would also manage it like that, right? So coming from the agent's perspective, you would get an audience field, and then from there, your results would be kind of trimmed to start with from that audience, right? So our agents can see some HR documents, right? But we don't necessarily want our employees looking at agent documents, and so that's how we manage that landscape. Correct. We'll ask them. So when we onboard the clients, we'll ask them to give us specific things in the search query, right? I said we wanted to keep it as lean as possible, so we're trying to get them to send us just a handful of parameters through that query pipeline, through that request, right? And one of those things is going to be an audience.
We have separate collections, right? So we want a business collection to actually be on its own, and then everything that is employee related goes into its own collection as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Each collection has its own set of the data repositories. They may actually, be the same at some point, but that we keep them separate.
What's your environment setup like? Are you bare metal or Docker or VMs? And then how does the Fusion layer affect your performance?
So we actually have virtual machines and actual physical machines. Those actually, we have Zookeeper on virtual, and we have Fusion and Solar in actual physical servers. Fusion into the, when we add Fusion into the picture, it's actually running super fast. Actually, when we were actually comparing it to the old product, that was so fast that we actually couldn't believe it.
Legal made us take that slide out that said what our physical landscape was, right? I mean, so that we didn't expose ourselves for attacks, right? So, but
Well, how much is it adding into, on top of the solar query?
Oh.
yeah, not a lot at all. In less than milliseconds. I mean, you're talking the hop through Fusion is so fast, even with all these modifications through the pipelines. Even during indexing, we're not seeing a very high, latency from index to, of course you have to tune your searchers, and a lot of that stuff still applies from the Solar side, right? You have to tune your commits and tune your searchers, and if you're warming caches, and so a lot of that technical stuff still applies, and you manage that through your, configurations in Solar, right? And Fusion just sits right at the high level and just kind of acts like the usher between them, right?
Yeah. I think at some point we ran some tests and we were looking at maybe at the worst case scenario, 30 milliseconds. But you know what? That's particular to the actual data you have in your collections and stuff like that, right? So, at the worst case scenario, 30 milliseconds. To us, that was even faster than the actual regular searches we were experiencing. Yeah. Yeah.
Correct. Yes, sir? Sorry. Yep, so Fusion, both instances of Fusion, because we're load balanced and we sit behind a load balancer, both instances of Fusion are live and they both connect to the same. Now, I'm talking, we have intra data center and we have also a separate data center, but as far as the intra data center, yes, both Fusions point to the same Zookeeper instance, meaning that from a connector standpoint, right, Zookeeper knows the connectors do a good job of telling everybody what time it last ran and all of that stuff. So there's not, we also run multiple Spark, on both sides. But there's not a lot of stepping on toes, right, because everything is run through that same Zookeeper ensemble. Yeah. And we do use a fairly large Zookeeper ensemble.
Yeah. To his point, when actually one scheduler is down on one Fusion instance, the other one goes to Zookeeper and says, well, this one is down, so I'm actually going to take over and start actually kicking off those jobs that we needed to run at that particular time, and so on for anything with connectors and the API services.
Yes, sir.
You like American Idol?
we have to be careful on that one too.
Second question was, how long did it take you? Like, once
I looked at Rob over there. We probably ran the longest proof of concept with Lucidworks ever. I can't tell you how long they were here. They were on site. They helped us. They kind of held our hands, right? Like we said, we hadn't been out in this space for a long time. And so trying to get that spun up and trying to get that ready to go, they really kind of took us under the wing and showed us how we should do it. I think our POC was probably, I don't want to say.
We did so many things. Like we started, it's like one of those things, right? So you see this, you see like, oh, you can connect to a database, you can connect to ServiceNow. So we keep, adding stuff to the actual POC. And these guys were so helpful that it's like at some point, oh my gosh, what are they gonna come up with? So we wanted to actually scope it down to 2 weeks. But adding those, things here and there, we actually took a little bit longer. But it was actually all in the interest of actually exploring the tool and see what if this is actually the tool we needed.
And our processes, just to finish up on that, and our processes at Allstate are very different. We have to go through a procurement process, so we have to, Lucidworks had to be vetted by our legal team and a lot of that kind of stuff, right? Once we got the product in-house and we were ready to go, we went through development and test environments. Our first production client made it in just a couple of months. So, but that was after, of course, all of that dance.
So we didn't so in the older product, we actually even had 2 different infrastructures, one for the business and one internal, right? So you usually get the best boxes for production, physical and stuff like that. So we were actually so comfortable with this new product and how how resilient it was that we actually figured we don't need to get that many boxes anymore. We can actually get everything in these same boxes, and just let Solar do its thing, right? So Solar Cloud. You want to create a collection, you want X amount of replicas, put them anywhere you want. This is the actual size of the cluster. And so far, we haven't had any kind of issues with that, right? So we were really happy with that performance. So we didn't change anything, really.
Right, and in the Solar Cloud, we're on Solar 5.5.1, right? And so the Cloud API allows you, it handles, it does rules, right? So you can say, so you can try to avoid hotspots, right? We have a couple of small clients. We only really want them, to have 2 replicas, right? Instead of the really big, large clients that are doing a lot of volume, maybe they have 4 replicas or 8 replicas, right? And so the Solar API does a really good job of at the time you create the collection, right? It looks for hotspots and things that it can do, right? And it tries its best to do that, right? And if you see via those charts and graphs, if you start to see query times going up, you can adjust those as you need to. You can rebalance and all of that stuff.
The relevancy rules, that's actually, yes. That's one of the things we saw a big improvement, actually. Back on the old product, we had a bunch of actual rules to pretty much get those documents to the top. It was a really difficult sell to our business team. We actually told them, you were not going to need the majority of them. We actually like the relevance ranking out of the box better than they actually had with idle. And then we pretty much went through a process of actually showing them, this is your production data today. Do your own comparison. Try to actually break it. They were actually amazed on how many rules they actually kind of pretty much erased out of the system. And think about thousands of rules to manage that. And they actually only have maybe like 50 or something like that. Just think about synonyms. And then for best bets, something we didn't cover, but it's, you want a query to actually bring that specific result to the top. They actually reduced that a lot, considerably, from the other system to this one. So relevancy, even by its own, just changing the product, went up considerably.
And we moved over to the BM25 straight away out of the box.
Similarity, yeah.
Right, instead of TF-IDF. TF-IDF has its flaws, and BM25 just seemed to be a little better fit for us. And we did that even before going to production. So just as we were setting up the environment, the folks at Lucidworks did a real good job of helping us kind of tune those things out so that we could get the best possible product to our clients.
Okay. Any more questions? I couldn't hear you. Can you? So why we picked Fusion over solar? So yeah, we kind of we looked at solar, right? So as Sean mentioned, right? So we wanted to actually have all these connectors and not really do a lot of work. So we are only 3 guys, so we really needed to actually, have something easy, ready to go, fetch us the data and does most of the work for us. So that was really one of the deciding factors on it, right? So you want to add anything?
No.
Okay.
Well, we have a real heavy life cycle, right? So for us to get something into production, it's not like Solar 6 comes out and the next week we're in production with it, right? We have to go through procurement processes, we have to stage it, we have to test it, we have to do that work, and then we have to release it in a kind of confined environment and then move on. So for us, rapid patching, that's just not something we're...
Yeah. Well, for us, we actually have a Puppet, right? So we've actually built our modules in such a way that we just want to change a version number, and it would actually install the new one, right? You just need to feed it the actual build or archive. But then again, we're actually kind of a financial company, so we have a bunch of rules to get those things out there. Unless it's actually compliance, it will take a little bit longer to get those patches out. But we can just get our machine pretty much install it within the 10 minutes, right? So.
I didn't hear the question. Yeah, if it's something that we found in solar, we're not doing a ton. We're running solar almost out of the box, right? And so with some of the modifications for BM25 and some of the fields in our collections and stuff like that, otherwise we're generally out of the box, right? And so we haven't found any major bugs in performance, even at that 100,000, 100,000 a day, 200,000 a day kind of mark. We're not seeing any performance issues or any bugs specifically. So for us, we would be able to, if we found a major bug, right, we would be able to patch it relatively quickly, right? So, but those kinds of things, like I said, we haven't seen that too much. Okay, thanks everybody.
Well, thank you very much.